people aren't stupid. This politics of no translation is going to be the way forward.
No, for sure.
Money on politics, money in your pocket, Medicare for all. No one has to decipher what the hell that means.
Well, here we go again. It's yet another episode of backtracking. I know this is getting rather repetitive, but I'm going to repeat. Get used to it because this is going to be the theme of these midterms. But it's another episode of communists trying to now convince us that they're not crazy. They didn't say the things they did about 2 seconds ago. And that was woke one. We swear we've changed. To quote that very video itself, the underlying premise here is that the voters are stupid and we'll be able to convince them that we're just some sensible, empathetic person who wants healthcare and affordability for the American people. And that's all they're campaigning on, which clearly, given the primary results, probably is not exactly as true as they seem to think. But anyways, the subject of today's story involves Hasan Piker once again and his BFF, the Michigan Democrat Senate candidate by the name of Abdul Al-Sayed, which is apparently how he's requested we pronounce his name, and so we're going to follow his wishes there. But according to a CNN K-File expose this week, apparently Mr. Sayed here was caught deleting about 100 plus different YouTube videos before he began his run for Senate. Now, you may be asking yourself, if this guy has always just stood for affordability in healthcare and he's not a radical communist or anything like that, what could possibly be the content of these videos? Well, exactly as you might expect, it's what AOC would describe as simply woke one, but I think is something much deeper and underlying. The sheer fact of the matter is we find a repeated theme here that this guy is actually just a resentful, hostile third worlder who hates America, hates American culture, hates everything that this country stands for and wants to tear it down, and is fundamentally just as a person incompatible with the United States of America itself. But of course, if you say that, that's considered Islamophobic, right? How dare you be hateful or something? How dare you correctly point out, yeah, this guy clearly just hates the country and hates all of its values and is not assimilatable because he refuses to be, right? Because the content of these videos, for example, include things like a little more than healthcare or APAC or something like that. We also have him calling to end 4th of July fireworks on the basis that they're environmentally and ecologically damaging. That's right. Cancel the 4th of July. To which I say, I'm sure that's the reason he's against the fireworks, right? Even though fireworks shows are far from something unique to America. It's not because he simply hates the 4th of July itself. Again, he just hates the country. He resents everything that it stands for. He's fundamentally a hostile invader, right? No. It's just because of, his wokeness. No, it's not about wokeness, right? I mean, it is, sure. But understand the wokeness isn't, oh, silly hippie believes crazy things about the environment. The wokeness is crazy, insane, violent, jihadi communist wants to destroy the United States and everything that it stands for. So just properly understand, when we use the word woke or whatever, please, I know the image that comes to your mind is some naive, silly hippie in Portland. No. Okay, these people are dangerous. They're radical. They seek violence, by the way, and they cheer on violence as you see the supposedly, woke hippie mob, celebrating political assassinations and things like that. So just keep that in mind. On top of that, too, by the way, as if the whole hostile anti-American third worlder argument couldn't be more true, he has different videos where he just rags on the sport of football. Keep in mind, he's running in Michigan, home of some Big Ten teams there, home of the Detroit Lions. It's the Midwest. They love it out there. But obviously, as someone who probably grew up, just resenting the country around him, resenting whatever you might call to be traditional white culture or whatever it is, American culture, it shouldn't be much of a surprise, right? This guy, again, is just basically a hostile foreign third worlder, presenting himself in the skin suit of some type of American political candidate. And that's what it's all about and a lot more. So that said, guys, let's talk about this and let's talk about how things continue to fall apart for Mr. El Sayed here. By the way, at the time we're recording this, election night is just beginning over in Wisconsin, and it shouldn't be much of a surprise if you watched Al-Sayed's primary as well, that Francesca Hong, the crazy communist over there, is appearing to underperform. Not sure who's going to win the race at the current moment, but if you remember, Al-Sayed barely won his primary, and that was a big wake-up call. Hey, these DSA communists are not that viable in the actual battleground states of this country. Looks like the same thing's happening in Wisconsin as well, so just keep that in mind. Anyways, let's get into this story, though, and we'll keep you posted probably later tonight on the Hong election. But first, guys, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That's the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, as you can see right here, so Al-Sayed was apparently caught deleting about 100 plus YouTube videos before he began his run for Senate. In them, he floated replacing the Second Amendment with, quote, healthcare for all, which, sounds pretty ridiculous to begin with, but we'll explain what he meant by that in a second. So he wanted to replace the Second Amendment, ending 4th of July fireworks, and he compared football to the slave trade. I kid you not. Yeah, we have to deconstruct football, right? You notice a pattern here too, by the way. Would he ever say the same about whatever sport's popular in the Middle East? I seriously doubt so. And dismissed the border crisis. Goes on a lot more. Here's, for example, what CNN's K-File found out for themselves.
We had previously covered on this show that he deleted a lot of tweets about defund the police. Now, what we have found now is more than 100 of his YouTube videos on his YouTube channel that appear to have been made private. And one thing that is worth noting here is that his campaign now says that these don't reflect his beliefs today. But one thing that's worth pointing out is this really isn't a distant archive. These are comments from the last 4 years, with one of these videos posted as recently as 2 years ago. I want to run through a few of them of what we found. Now, you did mention that 4th of July video. You can see the taken down video right there from July 2024. Al-Sayed cited air pollution from Detroit, fireworks, chemicals used in fireworks, PTSD among veterans, and risk to children and pets. And he asked if Americans could find another way to celebrate. And Aaron, that is really just one example. In another that we found from April 2023 after a school shooting in Tennessee, Al-Sayed floated replacing the Second Amendment right to bear arms with a constitutional right to health care, saying, what if we tweaked the Constitution, amended the amendment, and instead of the right to bear arms, we changed it to the right to have health care? In another September 2022 video that we found, Al-Sayed also blasted Republicans for focusing on the southern border, calling it an issue they, quote, love to flog, adding in, quote, it doesn't even make the top 5 among issues that people in the United States actually care about that affect their lives.
Yeah, so are you noticing a pattern here? And Al-Sayed's far from the only leftist that engages in this very type of behavior. It goes along the lines of, hey, let's say and believe the most radical, insane things. And then when people try to corner us on it, we say, what do you mean? We just want healthcare, bro. Why are you so mean to us? Why are you so opposed to us just wanting to give you healthcare, right? As if, by the way, that's what they even want to do, as if, state-run medicine actually provides quality healthcare and saves people's lives. That's not even how it works, but that's what they use to virtue signal. But you notice how that's not even true, because let's go through that, okay? First of all, even in the order in which CNN here presents it, I found it to be very telling. The 4th of July thing, we well established, it's really just that he's a third world scumbag who does not like America and, doesn't like celebrations of America. I doubt he's going to the Islamic world and, calling them out for their environmental unfriendliness, right? Is he going to, let's say, the Gulf states or something who, are building all these luxury resorts and tourist attractions? Oh, hey, that's bad for the local environment. That's not a good use of water. No, of course he would never do that, because it's only when what he perceives to be white Americans are celebrating something, that's the problem. But of course, he goes and does that. He also likewise basically tries to blame the Nashville Christian massacre that took place a couple years ago, not on the issue of trans radicalism, but rather on guns. The specific quote here was, school shootings are not a trans problem. School shootings are a gun problem. To which I say, I'm sure, by the way, if it's like a straight white male, he'll have the exact same rhetoric. It won't be anything different. But do you also notice, by the way, This is another recurring theme with al-Sayed, because even a couple weeks ago, he was asked about Islamic terrorist attacks, and his response was basically that broken or hurt people hurt other people, which is to say, and you notice this like recurring pattern within left-wing ideology that, by the way, closely correlates to stuff like abolish prisons, empty the prisons, for example. And it's essentially this belief that the actual people who commit violence, actual criminals, murderers, terrorists, etc., are not actually accountable for their own actions. And it's not just simply the case that in human society, you're going to have a 2 to 3% of people who are just psychopaths and are going to be violent no matter what. No, it's because of socioeconomic factors or whatever, right? And if we were just less transphobic, less Islamophobic, then this type of violence would not be happening. And so therefore, that's why they always say, that's why where you get the idea of abolish prisons, right? Because we basically have this kind of, I don't know, blank slate theory idea that, you know, human violence could be eradicated if we just gave them healthcare and empathy and compassion and all that stuff. That's how you arrive to the conclusion, by the way, of abolish prisons. So I just want to point that out, because this is something al-Sayed has said time and time and again, whether it's trans terrorists, Islamic terrorists, it's simply because, oh, society made them that way. It's not their own fault. They're not accountable for their own actions. So if we simply treated them better, they wouldn't be doing those things. And that's why, by the way, you also get slogans like abolish prison, which, of course, like, needless to say, is insane. It defies basic human nature. You know, do we have to get into that? Why, you know, even if people are given ideal circumstances in life, some people go crazy. Some people simply are crazy. The idea that you don't need institutions to incarcerate crazy people is obviously insane. But, you know, just another quote, we want healthcare, sensible, moderate position here that al-Sayed is holding. But anyways, it goes on. And those are the big picture issues, but I really want to hone in on this football thing as well, because when you combine that with the way he feels about the 4th of July, again, you know, we sort of have said before that oftentimes communism is not necessarily just an economic ideology, right? It's a social condition. It's a social condition where basically bitter, resentful losers start to, you know, mobilize and get violent against the things that are beautiful or exceptional or successful in the world, right? That's what it's really about. It's a social condition of envy and jealousy rather than an economic ideology about workers controlling the means of production. Well, arguably, I would say that, you notice the way in which Abdul al-Sayed just kind of feels about defining characteristics of America, right? 4th of July fireworks, football, things like that. Really highlights that, right? Like, this guy can say whatever he wants about his left-wing economic ideology, but it's not about that. He's just like a bitter, resentful, again, third world person who is in this country and resents the greatness, resents, you know, the fun people are having all around him because he's miserable. And that's why you get to this point where it's like, I hate the 4th of July fireworks. I hate football. I hate having fun. Which, by the way, Francesca Hong, his colleague over in Wisconsin, likewise even recently said. She said, they asked her, why do you want it? We played this in a video. They asked her, why do you want to cancel Halloween? Or why don't you like Halloween? And she basically says, well, I'm just not a very fun person. Are you noticing a pattern here? Right? They can mask it in the guise of left-wing ideology. Here's the economic ideas we have. It's not about that. It's about the fact bitter, resentful losers basically hate everyone around them who are having fun, living nice lives, enjoying things, enjoying, American traditions that Abdul al-Sayed, for whatever reason, doesn't feel like he naturally blends in with or identifies with. And so as a result, that's how you really end up with communism. And that's what communism really is about. Trump said the quote a couple months ago, I should say, that like we've been at war with communism for thousands of years. And some people try to say, oh, well, no, that's not true because it was invented as an ideology in the 1800s. See, you're misunderstanding what it actually is, right? Karl Marx could have tried to rationalize it with his long essays and books about theory and things like that. But, who was he? He himself, a jealous, bitter, resentful loser who wrote out a manifesto to rationalize that kind of fundamental loser status he had in life. And then that's what it's about. And it's the same thing here. So anyways, maybe you'll say I'm overthinking it, but that's why, for example, we arrive to quotes like this, where he, compares football, the most popular sport in Michigan, by the way, I would assume, football to the slave trade. And here's another one where he says, football is very much associated with a particularly masculine and oftentimes toxically masculine culture. What? Take a listen.
Football is very much associated with a particularly masculine and oftentimes toxic toxically masculine culture. And so much of it was about you wanted to be able to get back up and play for your team, and you really aren't allowed to show pain or vulnerability. That's part of the sport.
You know what I find hilarious is that after years of denying that they were really like this, Democrats are simply now just running candidates who openly affirm all of the things conservatives were claiming they were about for years, right? Because I remember back to 2016 or so, this was probably a big Thanksgiving table conversation, for example, right? The liberals want to cancel every major holiday because it's racist. They want to take away things like tackle football because them kids are going soft these days, stuff like that, right? And back then, I do remember a campaign for several years, especially after Trump won the first time, where Democrats were trying to deny this type of stuff, right? Oh, we don't hate Thanksgiving. We're not canceling Christmas. You're allowed to say Merry Christmas. Football, whatever, sports. We're not all sissy liberals or something like that. And then now who are the candidates for the Democrat Party, right? It's exactly that. It's Mr. Football's far right and toxically masculine. Halloween is bad. Christmas is bad. Thanksgiving is bad, right? Let's all just be like miserable, soft losers and things like that. And, it's like your MAGA uncle from 2015 has completely been vindicated, okay? Because that is who's now officially representing the Democrat Party, or all of the things that we said the leftists were trying to cancel years ago, and the leftists looked at us like we're crazy, and then here they are, right now, the candidates for the Democrat Party. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, as it pertains to Hasan Piker, this isn't really much of a surprise by now. I mean, it's everywhere. We already know about this, but he is also likewise coming under fire for past comments. Here's just a couple more as of this week, but the list goes on and on.
You literally need to be in jail. You need to be in prison for the rest of your fucking life. Maybe even fucking against the wall. I'm sick and tired of motherfuckers who go, developing nations deserve to be in the position that they're in because, sorry. No, seriously, fucking capital punishment.
Some of what he actually has said about the depravity of the October 7th terror attack, the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Quote, "It doesn't matter if effing rapes happened on October 7th. That doesn't change the dynamic for me. The Palestinian resistance is not perfect." Now, let that sink in. Hasan Piker is excusing sexual violence by Hamas terrorists. He also claims Hamas is, quote, 1,000 times better than Israel. Hamas is a designated terror organization, not just by the U.S., but by the EU, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, just to name a few.
Yeah, so first of all, let's not forget top campaign surrogate to al-Sayed, and he wonders why he's massively struggling outside of college towns in Michigan. I know that's a big surprise, but apparently, according to al-Sayed, it's unfair and disingenuous to ask him why his close friend that he's openly campaigning with has said things like this. And by the way, apparently these are all things, folks, we say when we just want healthcare, right? Me, when I want healthcare, Hasan Piker wants healthcare so bad that he has publicly stated he believes you should be executed if, for example, you, in the context of a political or geopolitical debate, properly identify that many third world countries are in the state they're in due to their own dysfunction rather than the product of Western colonialism or imperialism or whatever, which, by the way, is objectively true. If you try to make that argument, right, that, hey, the people, the leaders themselves, they're the ones who are currently in control of the country, look what they're doing. No, Hasan Piker apparently believes you should be. That's what he just said, right? Violence should be inflicted upon you if you disagree about the geopolitics of the global South. But again, that's because he just wants healthcare, right? What does that have to do with healthcare? You answer me that. But we have that. We have him apparently justifying, war crimes and terrorism and rape and sexual assault and things like that, right? Which you would think on the surface is not very woke of him, but that kind of goes back to our theory that we've been pushing for a while, which is that on the left and in the Democrat Party itself, you're gradually starting to witness third world replace woke, which has been to say the more third worlders, the woke left-wing hippies import to be part of their coalition, the more the actual ideology of the American left will look more like, let's say, Middle Eastern terrorists than Portland or Canadian hippies or something like that, right? That's why, for example, Pride marches have been replaced by Palestine marches and things like that. We've been over that, right? But I guess by that token, it's actually not really inconsistent. And by the way, some people have tried to argue in the past that, Abdul al-Sayed, Hasan, Piker, they're far left social progressives. How could that possibly be compatible with Islamic terrorism or the jihadis? Aren't those religious fundamentalists? But see, that's the thing. You notice how they end up converging to the same position where the woke progressive will actually excuse and justify the acts of Islamic terrorism. And by the way, why is that? Because really what it's about is that's what it is. It's like resentful third worlders kind of all working together, okay? And so anything they deem to be fighting the West, white people, Christians, whatever thing they think, right? They see Israel, for example, as a settler apartheid state, and that's their historic contention, right? Anywhere where they see that, they basically will say, I'm brown, you're brown, we're siding with the brown. It doesn't matter if that's from the perspective of, say, traditional Islamic fundamentalism or from woke progressivism. It always ends up at the same place, and that's what it is, okay? But anyways, I know I'm kind of overanalyzing that. Point being, Abdul al-Sayed is campaigning with this guy in a battleground state. I don't think it's going... Actually, I know it's not politically going well because we just saw the primary results. We see what's happening with Francesca Hong right now. These people, let's not get complacent, but they seem to be pretty screwed. Now, of course, the big general election pivot that they're gambling on is the new campaign to convince people that, it's not logical, it's not fair to use their rather recent words against them and point out, this is what these people actually stand for. And of course, let's review the AOC damage control attempt. They sort of sent her out to be the ambassador and run the excuse. And of course, she was famous for not just saying woke one was crazy, whatever that was supposed to mean. Again, doesn't woke one imply there's a woke two? So there's a sequel to this, so you guys haven't changed. But even her particular excuse on this front is, and I quote, and why apparently it's not fair to bring up Hasan Piker or Abdul al-Sayed or AOC or any of these people's own words, is, and I quote, rhetoric in that time is not the rhetoric they would use today. Which, first of all, clearly an attempt to rebrand for some type of national political campaign, sure. But secondly, notice how, by the way, all she says is that that's not their rhetoric anymore. So rhetoric versus belief versus policy versus the things they actually stand for, here, by the way, is an open admission. We didn't change. They haven't changed a damn thing they believe. They still stand by that. But to quote it once again, the voters are stupid. You shouldn't believe us. You shouldn't believe us when we're blatantly being communists who are lying to you and proudly doing it, because we don't use that rhetoric anymore. So therefore, even though we haven't changed a single thing we're going to believe, or actually we're going to do when we're in power, don't worry, because we talk differently now. Now we just talk about healthcare.
Woke one was crazy.
Woke one was crazy. Okay, that's actually...
and I think that what's important is that we have to assess what
was it. I mean, did the movement go too
now.
far with some of those positions? I mean, you briefly supported the idea of defunding the police.
Well, I think that during this time and especially during COVID, there was a huge opening of the Overton window. We were shut down. There was some of the highest unemployment rates that we have seen because of those shutdowns. Yeah. And I think that the doors were really open in trying to entertain any and every policy that was going to get us to a better place. And I actually think that the discussions that were had in that time were quite fruitful.
Yeah, woke one was crazy, bro. They just talk about it like, their college years or something like that. But even notice, like most people's college years, deep down, they don't really actually regret it. They had a lot of fun, even if they want to pretend like that's not them anymore. Okay, right? She still goes back. She still looks back fondly on those times, which, is not translating to, when you're 35 or something, hey, let's go all have a reunion in Vegas or something, have fun for a weekend, whatever. No, that means when they get into power, I don't know, let's get a little nostalgic or something like that. Let's reinstitute it, right? That's what that actually means. Like, you listen to her, she basically is admitting she doesn't regret it. We don't regret saying we wanted to abolish or defund the police. We don't regret, by the way, the massive crime spike that engulfed America because of our ideas being implemented throughout the 2020s. No, we don't care, right? People we killed, whatever, apparently, according to them. But even beyond that, right, apparently the discussions were fruitful. Should we abolish the police? That was a fruitful discussion. I think we learned a lot about that, right? We learned a lot from that. What? And then, of course, going back to the central point, so telling. It's not the same rhetoric we use anymore, so you shouldn't believe us. Okay, so translation. They haven't changed a single bit, which, by the way, I think you see. Because despite them constantly talking about woke one, right? They keep using this term and pretending, oh, that was just 2020. No, they've done a lot more since 2020. For example, it was just a couple months ago. We had leftists en masse celebrating the assassination of Charlie Kirk, celebrating political violence against conservatives, but they just want healthcare, they swear, right? Even Democrats, ladies and gentlemen, were on the House floor protesting a moment of silence for Charlie Kirk. This is even in office, not just random people on the internet. Now, apparently, they just want us to believe that was all woke one. And somewhere around the past 2 or 3 weeks, they had this magical transformation that they never spoke about or identified, but suddenly now, like dead naming someone or something, it's completely unfair to bring up not just their distant, but their recent past against them. Even though this is clearly still them, Al-Sayed has never defined how and why he ideologically changed. As a matter of fact, he really didn't. Neither did Hasan Piker, by the way. If anything, he's only gotten more radical throughout the years, right? Going and, praising Mao Zedong, Lenin, going to China, going to Cuba. But, he's like a sensible, normal American liberal now. Yeah, totally. He's not just like the same crazy communist he's been all these years. Like, what are you talking about? Where's the transformation? We haven't seen it, right? The only thing that's transformed is that they haven't been in power for the past couple of years because they obviously lost power. And, even in their own words, by their own admission, they figured out that saying this crazy stuff was not viable for voters, so they're publicly stating, yeah, we're lying to you, right? AOC says we're changing the rhetoric. Abdul Al-Sayed's own friends are saying to his face, yeah, we're going to figure out how to gaslight the voters because they're stupid. And all of this is apparently unfair to bring up, right? How dare you point out that the communists haven't actually changed and there's still no good communists? Well, I don't know. I'm just saying. But anyways, guys, there you have it. I'm sure we'll be back here again because this is the same constant pattern, right? Please don't use our own words against us. But for now, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.